It was meant to be nothing more than a cruel joke, the kind of shallow amusement arrogant young men indulge in when they believe the world exists solely for their entertainment. Inside the crowded bar of an exclusive country club, laughter spilled from a corner table where a group of wealthy men sat. Their designer suits clung to them like uniforms of entitlement, their smugness practically stitched into every seam. Among them was Daniel Crawford, only 32 years old, already a millionaire several times over, and armed with a smile so carefully practiced it was as much a weapon as it was a charm. That evening, amidst the haze of expensive whiskey and the hollow bravado that accompanies it, someone tossed out a challenge that sent the table into raucous laughter. "I dare you to marry her. 6 months, keep a straight face. Prove you can stomach it." "Bet you can't." The her in question was a woman Daniel had never even spoken to, Leela, a quiet, plus-sized waitress who worked in the less glamorous dining hall of the club. She was the kind of person men like Daniel and his companions rarely noticed, except perhaps to mock. To them, she was poor, fat, and invisible. But Daniel, caught in the arrogance of the moment and drunk on pride, smirked and said, "You're on." Just like that, a wager was set, one that would twist the course of his life in ways no one at that table could have imagined. When Daniel first approached Leela, he knew almost nothing about her. She lived in a cramped studio apartment above a laundromat in a rough part of town. Her wardrobe was simple, her shoes worn thin, but her eyes carried something rare, a quiet light that refused to dim, the kind of glow that only comes from weathering storms and still standing. At first, Leela didn't believe him when he asked her out. Men like him didn't notice women like her, they didn't see her at all. But Daniel could be charming when he wanted to be, persistent in a way that wore down her doubts. And eventually she agreed to meet him for coffee. In those early weeks, Daniel wore the role of suitor like a costume. He listened just enough, smiled in all the right places, and played his part with precision. To his friends he reported every detail with a smirk, each outing nothing more than proof that he was carrying out the cruel bet. But something unexpected began to stir in the quiet moments. Whenever Leela spoke, her words revealed layers Daniel hadn't anticipated. She told him stories about caring for her younger siblings after her mother's death, about holding down 2 jobs during high school just to keep the electricity running at home, about volunteering at a shelter on weekends because she believed no one deserved to feel forgotten. There was no bitterness in her voice, no resentment, only resilience and a quiet strength that caught Daniel off guard. He brushed off the strange pull he felt, convincing himself it was nothing more than curiosity, a novelty he would soon grow bored of. Yet, little by little, something inside him began to shift. The turning point came on an ordinary Thursday evening, beneath a sky heavy with rain. Daniel had offered to drive Leela home after her shift. When they arrived, her apartment building was dark, the power knocked out. As they walked through the dim hallway, Daniel's eyes fell on a hand-drawn calendar taped to the wall. It was filled with reminders, notes about food pantry pickups, cheerful birthday wishes scrawled in bright markers, gentle nudges about doctor's appointments. At first, he assumed it was hers, but then he realized it was meant for everyone in the building. Leela had made it herself so that the elderly residents wouldn't forget important dates, so that no one in that worn-down building would feel overlooked. No one had asked her to do it. No one paid her. She simply cared. That night, Daniel couldn't sleep. He found himself replaying the way she had smiled at Mrs. Grant, the nearly blind woman in apartment 3B, guiding her up the stairs with patience and warmth. He thought about the way her laughter seemed to ease the heaviness in those around her, how she gave without expecting anything in return. For the first time in his life, Daniel realized he wasn't the one doing the seeing, Leela was. She saw people, all of them, even the ones the world ignored. And as much as he tried to remind himself of the bet, of the cruel joke that had started it all, Daniel couldn't shake the feeling that he was no longer playing a game. The woman he had once thought invisible had begun to change everything. Daniel had seen it in her countless times before. The way she quietly handed a warm meal to a struggling neighbor without hesitation. The way she bent to help a young mother carry her groceries up the stairs. all while smiling as if it were the most natural thing in the world. None of it was ever for show. She never performed kindness to be seen, because more often than not, she didn't even know anyone was watching. Daniel had been watching though, silently, and each of those small, unguarded gestures of compassion began to erode the walls he had spent years building around himself. Over the weeks that followed, cracks began to form in his carefully constructed armor. He stopped bragging to his friends after dates with Leela. Then he stopped meeting them altogether. The cruel updates, the smug smirks, they fell away because he could no longer bring himself to turn her into a joke. For the first time in his life, Daniel started listening, truly listening, when someone spoke. He found himself leaning into Leela's words, absorbing the warmth and sincerity that poured from her with such effortlessness. And as he listened, he noticed something else, something unsettling in its unfamiliarity. He felt different with her. Lighter. Grounded. For once, he wasn't the wealthy, polished millionaire or the man hiding behind charm and expensive suits. With Leela, he was simply Daniel. She didn't want his money, his approval, or the status that seemed to impress everyone else. She looked at him in a way no one ever had before, not as a prize, not as a joke, but as a man. And it shook him. Yet, no matter how deeply he found himself falling, the bet lingered over him like a storm cloud, heavy and dark. It poisoned even the sweetest moments. Every laugh they shared, every time her hand slipped gently into his, every small kindness she offered him, it all twisted in his chest, because he knew the foundation was rotten. He had never told her the truth. Their love, or at least the love she believed in, had been born out of a cruel deception. And the guilt was a slow, relentless poison. The breaking point came the night of his proposal. Daniel had planned it with the cold calculation of a gambler preparing his final move. A lavish dinner, candlelight flickering against crystal glasses, a diamond ring carefully chosen not for her, but for the photo he would send his friends, their final proof that he had won the wager. It was supposed to be his victory lap, the crowning moment of arrogance. But when Leela walked into the restaurant in a simple blue dress, her shy smile lighting the room more than all the candles combined, something inside him fractured beyond repair. Suddenly the plan felt monstrous. This wasn't a game anymore. He wasn't playing. He loved her. And the realization terrified him. They married soon after, not with fanfare or glittering receptions, but in a small church whose walls seemed to hum with warmth. The pews were filled with the people who mattered most, Leela's neighbors, her siblings, the handful of family members who adored her. They came not for spectacle, but out of genuine love for the woman who had touched each of their lives in quiet, unshakable ways. Daniel's friends were there too, scattered in the back, smirking like vultures, waiting for the final punchline of the cruel joke to land. But Daniel didn't hear their snickers, didn't see their sideways glances. All he could hear was Leela's voice as she spoke her vows, her words steady and clear as she promised to stand by him in sickness and in health, for richer or poorer. She meant every syllable with a sincerity that cut him to the core. For a brief moment, Daniel allowed himself to believe he could bury the lie forever, that the love growing between them could eclipse the ugliness of its origin. But lies have a way of clawing their way into the light. And 2 months later, the truth surfaced. The truth surfaced in the most brutal way possible. One of Daniel's so-called friends, drunk and reckless at a charity gala, let it slip to a reporter that Daniel's marriage had started as nothing more than a cruel bet. Within days, the story exploded across headlines. Newspapers and tabloids painted him as a heartless millionaire who had humiliated his own wife for sport. Paparazzi camped outside their home, their cameras flashing whenever he stepped outside. Strangers on the internet hurled insults with ruthless ease, branding him a monster. Through it all, Leela's silence was the sharpest blow. She didn't scream at him, didn't throw things, didn't demand explanations. Instead, she quietly packed a single bag, walked out the door, and left without a word. Daniel found her days later at the community shelter, the same place she had volunteered long before they met. She was on her knees scrubbing the floors, her sleeves rolled up, her hair falling loose around her face. She looked up when he entered, and for the first time since he had known her, her eyes, once warm and endlessly open, were guarded, shut behind walls he didn't know how to break. He dropped to his knees beside her and begged her to listen, begged her to understand that the bet had ended long before he had asked her to marry him, that what he felt for her now was real, truer than anything in his life before. But Leela only shook her head. Her voice was steady when she spoke, but each word cut him like glass. Love built on lies isn't love at all. In the weeks that followed, Daniel tried everything he could think of. He donated to the shelter she loved so much. He spent his days volunteering there, sweeping floors, serving meals, washing dishes, not for recognition, but simply to be near her, to prove he was more than the man she thought he was. He gave up the penthouse and moved into her old neighborhood, working alongside her friends to fix leaky roofs, patch broken windows, and carry groceries for the elderly tenants she had always cared for. But Leela remained distant, her heart locked tight against him. It wasn't until the day he quietly paid for the surgery that restored Mrs. Grant's failing eyesight, doing it anonymously, without telling a soul, that something shifted. There were no cameras, no announcements, no applause. Just a frail old woman weeping with joy when she opened her eyes to the world again, and Daniel standing quietly in the corner, content to watch her happiness from the shadows. Leela found out by accident, not from him, and for the first time since leaving, she hesitated. It wasn't the money or the act itself that softened her. It was the fact that he hadn't tried to use it as a way to win her back. It was the quiet, steady kindness, the consistency that mirrored her own. Slowly, painfully, she let him back into her life. Not all at once, not with grand declarations or sweeping reconciliations, but in small, careful steps. A shared meal at the shelter. A walk home through the neighborhood they both knew. A moment of laughter that caught them both off guard. And in time, brick by brick, she allowed him back into her heart. Years later, when they stood once again in that same little church to renew their vows, the difference was unmistakable. This time there were no smirking friends in the back pews, no mocking laughter waiting to echo off the walls. The room was filled only with the people who loved them, the ones who had witnessed both their breaking and their healing. Daniel looked at Leela with tears streaming down his face, his voice trembling as he whispered the truth he had carried for so long. The bet was the worst decision of my life, but loving you was the best. Leela smiled then, a soft, forgiving smile that reached her eyes, and as they clasped hands beneath the gentle glow of the church lights, everyone in the room knew they had beaten the odds. What had begun as cruelty had been remade into something stronger than either of them could have imagined, a love that had been tested by betrayal, scarred by truth, but ultimately redeemed by the quiet, relentless power of kindness.